"It happened. It happened. I can't believe it." The iconic words of Howard Cosell, forever etched in boxing history, capture a moment of sheer disbelief. But the tale of George Foreman, a man who shares his name with both a brutal pugilist and a beloved grill, is a story steeped in disbelief. A journey from personal turmoil to improbable reinvention and ultimate redemption. This isn't just a boxing story. It's the epic narrative of two men inhabiting one body, a captivating life journey perhaps unmatched by any athlete in history. From the depths of heavyweight division infamy to the heights of sporting world adoration as a jolly Santa Claus-esque figure, George Foreman's life is a Hollywood-worthy saga. He embodies the genuine puncher from a bygone era, a man who proved the old adage, the smaller they are, the harder they fall. This is the story of a man who, against all odds, transformed from the scourge of the ring to the sporting world's most unlikely and perhaps most endearing icon. Prepare to delve into the depths of a life story that defies expectations, a narrative as powerful and captivating as Foreman's legendary right hook. You would continue boxing even if you would lose over there? The interviewer's question hangs in the air, laced with incredulity. George Foreman's response, delivered with unwavering certainty, is a stark declaration of his unshakable self-belief. "I beg your pardon, you don't think about losing." This unwavering confidence, bordering on arrogance, was forged in the crucible of his early life, a life far removed from the glitz and glamour of the boxing ring. "I've seen pictures of him in his prime. He's picking up a full-grown cow." The hyperbole, though exaggerated, speaks to the sheer awe Foreman's physical presence inspired. "I am the danger," Foreman himself once stated, his voice a low rumble. "I'm the one to be afraid of." "Definitely," he continues, the chilling conviction palpable. "I'm the one who can hit you and knock you unconscious." The raw power he possessed was undeniable, legendary, whispered in hushed tones among boxing aficionados. "You hit Joe Frazier and he was actually off the floor. I mean both feet," marvels another commentator, still in awe decades later. "Can you imagine lifting somebody up in the air with one punch?" The image is almost cartoonish in its ferocity, yet it was the brutal reality of a Foreman onslaught. "Foreman hitting the heavy bag is one of the more prodigious sights I've had in my life," recalls a seasoned boxing observer, having witnessed countless pugilists in action. "Of all the people I've seen hitting heavy bags, including Sonny Liston, no one ever hit it the way Foreman did." The sheer force, the earth-shattering impact was a spectacle in itself. "Corman would hit this bag," the observer continues, the memory still vivid. Simon had just literally been picked off his feet. This raw, untamed power was the weapon Foreman wielded, a force of nature unleashed in the squared circle. But beneath the monstrous exterior, beneath the menacing scowl and devastating punches, lay a hidden vulnerability, a softness that he was trying to hide. This inner conflict, this battle between the brute and the gentle giant within, would define Foreman's tumultuous journey. "It was years before I could really look in the mirror and say, 'I'm who I want to be,'" Foreman confesses, his voice tinged with a hint of lingering regret, a testament to the long and arduous path to self-acceptance. Boxer George Foreman will put in retirement. The news, delivered with a definitive finality, reverberated through the boxing world. But Foreman, even in supposed defeat, remained defiant, his belief in his own destiny unshaken. "Fact is, the clock will not go back," the interviewer asserts, attempting to impose a sense of reality. Foreman's immediate retort is classic, unwavering Foreman. "That is not a fact, what you're saying. The fact is, I can become heavyweight champion of the world if I want to, at any age." This was not mere bravado. It was the unwavering conviction of a man who had stared into the abyss and emerged with an unshakable faith in his own potential. "A man with no dream will be dead," Foreman declared, his words echoing with the weight of his own experiences. "Without a dream, you cannot live at the urging of other people." This wasn't just boxing, it was a life philosophy, a mantra forged in the fires of adversity and tempered by the unwavering belief in self-determination. Born on January 10, 1949, George Foreman's early life was a stark contrast to the global icon he would become. Raised in Houston's most violent district, the notorious Fifth Ward, infamously known as the Bloody Fifth. Young George's environment was a breeding ground for hardship and survival instincts. To navigate this treacherous landscape, he had to suppress his innate gentleness, burying his natural teddy bear self beneath a more grisly exterior. A naturally large child, he quickly learned to command respect through his imposing physique, his sheer size becoming his shield and weapon. He thrived on the fear and deference his physical presence commanded, wielding his size to become a mugger of high prominence. In the Fifth Ward, where despair permeated the very air, George became a byproduct of a place where despair permeated through the air, his life spiraling downwards, heading nowhere and fast. His reputation as a menacing figure extended beyond the Fifth Ward, reaching across the city. He had a reputation all over the city, recalls a contemporary. He was known as a mugger, he was known as a mean guy. But even in the darkest corners of his life, a flicker of hope remained. One fateful night, during a routine act of petty theft, George's life took an unexpected turn. One night, as I was doing my normal stealing, he recounts, the memory still vivid. The police started chasing us. When the crooks are being pursued, the police go get the dogs. Cornered and desperate, young George sought refuge in the most unlikely of places. And the dogs sniffed them out, and as they got closer, he continues. And I saw a house. It was the smallest hole I'd ever seen, but I crawled underneath that house. Hiding beneath the floorboards, amidst the grime and shadows, George experienced a profound moment of epiphany. This sloped under the house. I covered myself from head to toe with just mud and dirt. Concealed in the darkness, he made a life-altering vow. So I crawled from underneath that house hours later. The police didn't get me, and I said, I'm not stealing anymore. I got to do something with my life. This 17-year-old thug, seeking a new path, was unexpectedly issued a dare by the very people he had victimized. They challenged him to take up boxing, a brutal test of his self-proclaimed toughness, a way to prove if he was truly as formidable as he claimed. Little did they know, this dare would not expose him as a fraud, but instead would uncover God-given punching power that very few men have ever possessed. Just 2 short years later, George's raw talent and ferocious power had propelled him onto the world stage. Selected for the 1968 Olympic Games, he bulldozed his way through every challenger, his fists speaking a language of raw, untamed force. "What a fight he is waging!" exclaimed a commentator, breathless with excitement. "Oh, the Russian has been beaten all over the ring. He appears to this reporter to have had enough." The referee intervened. The fight was stopped, and George Foreman is the winner of the gold medal in the heavyweight competition. The young miscreant, once lost in the dirt of the Fifth Ward, had ascended to the highest point of the Olympic podium, draped in the ultimate symbol of victory, gold. George had achieved his first ever dream, an accomplishment that would forever instill in him an indelible belief in himself, a profound understanding that he could, indeed, exceed in all things that others expected of him. But instead of basking in the adulation, instead of embracing the hero's welcome that awaited him, George, in a baffling twist, chose a different path. Unlike so many who, when they finally arrive in the spotlight, try to project a positive image of themselves, Foreman veered sharply in the opposite direction, adopting a new, even more sinister persona. "When I first met him, he was young and he was nice," recalls a boxing insider. "Within a year or so, he became one of the most surly people." This dramatic transformation wasn't accidental. It was a calculated emulation of his idol, the enigmatic and intimidating Sonny Liston. I later learned that he was mimicking his great idol's Sonny Liston. The insider reveals. Foreman himself readily admits, "I met Sonny Liston. He became my role model. He had to be the most angry fella." Liston's aura of menace, his almost palpable aggression, captivated the young Foreman. "I admit he'd look right through you," Foreman confesses. "And he wasn't putting on being mean. He was just not the nicest fella you'd meet." This perceived toughness, this carefully cultivated image of intimidation, became Foreman's twisted blueprint for success. "I said, that's the way you have to be heavyweight champion for the world," he reasoned. "I'm going to be that. He was mean. I even took it a little further. Equipped with a menacing scowl and a hostile mindset, the wrecking ball that was George Foreman was unleashed upon the unsuspecting heavyweight division. Fighters, once fearless, now approached the ring with trepidation. Fighters who had never exhibited caution before now fought fearfully, their confidence eroded by the looming specter of Foreman. He was a force of nature, a man with cement fists and an uncontrollable desire to inflict pain, who sought them out, tossing 200-pound men around with ease. Foreman's fighting style was brutal, efficient, and utterly devastating. Foreman bludgeoned his foes into submission with a blunt sledgehammer-like jab, his punches carrying the force of a battering ram. He was a manifestation of violence who needed not win by attrition, preferring instead to end fights decisively, swiftly, brutally. Foreman turned his opponent's bones to powder minutes into the fight, his knockouts legendary in their speed and ferocity. He had the determined look where he wanted to get on with it and get it over with, recalls a witness to Foreman's early dominance. And the fights as quickly as possible. Don't waste any time. Just do it. The boxing world watched in awe and perhaps a little fear as this new heavyweight titan emerged. There can be no question that George Foreman is possessed of extraordinary punching power, declared a commentator, capturing the prevailing sentiment. So young, so strong, so fearless, who does away with his opponents one after another. The question on everyone's mind, yeah, fighting a mark at any of them? Whatever your question, would I fight any of Foreman? Even boxing legends acknowledged the sheer force of nature that was George Foreman. Joe Frazier, himself a heavyweight icon, conceded, "Foreman is the strongest man I have ever been in a ring with, and in my opinion, he has got to be the most awesome physical specimen that has ever been in the heavyweights of Israel." But despite his dominance in the ring, despite the knockouts and the world title, genuine public adoration remained elusive. "Oh, there it is, George Foreman!" The announcer's booming voice heralded his arrival. But the crowd's response was far from celebratory. George was in every sense of the word a crowd pleaser, yet, inexplicably, the audience's cheers always eluded him. Instead of roars of approval, the arenas echoed with consistent boos, a chorus of disapproval that would haunt and trouble the mind of a young Foreman, a constant reminder of his failure to connect with the very people he sought to entertain. Assigning now, we have Joe Frazier the champion, and on the other side, the #1 contender, Mr. George Foreman, the announcer declared, setting the stage for a clash of titans. "And I want all the people in the country and in all parts of the world to come out and see this fight," he urged. "And I don't think you'll be interested in come out and see his two friends shake hands." The anticipation was palpable, the world holding its breath for the impending heavyweight war. "Joe Frazier me will declare war on that date as a challenger for the heavyweight title," the announcer proclaimed. "Big George Foreman, he's 6'4", and has a rate of 78.5 inches. At just 23 years old, Foreman, the young giant, had amassed a magnificent undefeated record, boasting 37 victories, 34 by knockout. He was the overwhelming favorite, the unstoppable force poised to dethrone the reigning champion. Twisting and turning his foe, the commentator described the unfolding action. George knew exactly how to keep the champion off balance. As swift leather crashed upon Frazier's face, the brutality of the fight became undeniable. It didn't take long for the legendary Howard Cosell to utter those now famous words, the words that would cement Foreman's place in boxing history. "Down goes Frazier, down goes Frazier, down goes Frazier." And then the climactic pronouncement, forever echoing through the annals of boxing: George Foreman is champion of the world. For some fighters, the weight of the world title, the immense fame and newfound respect, serves as a stabilizing force, grounding them, solidifying their sense of self. But for George Foreman, still grappling with his inner demons, still struggling to reconcile his public persona with his private self, the championship had a far different effect. Instead of bringing stability, it further corrupted his mental state. George was still resisting his softer side, a close observer noted, but deep down he would love to have been easygoing and in control of his temper. But control for Foreman had become synonymous with intimidation, with dominance, with fear. Foreman was addicted to being a figure that intimidated his peers. This addiction, born in his turbulent youth, now fueled his reign as champion. It was an addiction that fed his confidence and self-identity, but also one that left him deeply ashamed. Feeding on the fear that his status as champion instilled into the public, George, in a tragic, self-fulfilling prophecy, soon became the man that people loved to hate. "Fight, there's a huge press conference," recalls a boxing journalist, painting a vivid picture of Foreman's burgeoning arrogance. "And he said, 'Nobody talks unless you get my permission. I'm the champion now.'" The pronouncement, delivered with cold authority, was met with a chorus of boos. "People booed me," Foreman admits, almost with a perverse sense of satisfaction. "And it was great because they were booing the right guy. I was a bad fella because I did some things to people I'm ashamed of to this day." Another journalist recounts a similar encounter, a chilling display of Foreman's intimidating persona. "I remember a press conference where somebody asked him a question and George said, 'I'll answer that outside if you have the courage to step outside.'" Waiting in the wings, however, was a challenger who refused to be intimidated, a rising star who dared to challenge the seemingly invincible champion. Ken Norton, the division's newest sensation, fresh off a victory where he had broken the jaw of Muhammad Ali, posed a formidable threat. "You know what a steamroller is?" Norton famously taunted Foreman, his confidence radiating. "Well, I like to get a steamroller. They can't harden down and run over and mash them flat." But Foreman, blinded by arrogance, dismissed Norton's threat, underestimating the challenger's skill and determination. The fight was a brutal back-and-forth slugfest, a testament to both men's incredible power and resilience. "Savage exchange for the second time," the commentator exclaimed, the intensity reaching fever pitch. "He doesn't know where he is, and it is all over. George Foreman." In a stunning upset, Ken Norton had dethroned the seemingly invincible champion, shattering Foreman's aura of invincibility and sending shockwaves through the boxing world. But the most devastating blow, the defeat that would truly alter the course of George Foreman's life, was yet to come. Ali versus Foreman, the rumble in the jungle. At the peak of his hubris, at the zenith of his complacency, George agreed to defend his title against Muhammad Ali in the heart of Zaire, Africa, for a staggering $5 million. From the moment he arrived, he was in hostile territory. The people were very much rooting for his opponent, the legendary Ali. Already feeling aggrieved by the nation's opposition towards him, Foreman's mindset was fragile, volatile, ripe for manipulation. Ali, a master of psychological warfare, relentlessly exploited Foreman's insecurities, his incessant taunts further clouding his already compromised judgment. With no inhibitions and a total dependency on his power, Foreman fought with reckless abandon, abandoning strategy, relying solely on his brute force. Foreman threw punches with all the force he could generate, falling directly into Ali's meticulously crafted trap. The trap was set, and George fell into it. Inviting a man in, counterpunching, talking to him, the commentator described Ali's masterful strategy. Ali looks like he's trying to rest in this round, but Ali continues to start to form a great left hand on the chin of Georgia. Ali, employing his now iconic rope-a-dope tactic, absorbed Foreman's relentless onslaught, patiently waiting for his moment to strike. "Do you think Foreman is in that bad okay?" the commentator questioned, sensing a shift in momentum. Then, in the 8th round, it happened. Ali, sensing Foreman's exhaustion, his desperation, unleashed a lightning-fast combination. On a right hand, an unbelievably close and right-hand shot. The crowd erupted, a cacophony of cheers and disbelief. It happened, I can't believe it." Cosell's words echoed through the stadium, through television sets worldwide, as George Foreman, the invincible champion, crumbled to the canvas. "What has happened to it? There he goes," the commentator exclaimed. No one in the auditorium paying any attention to him. Nobody wants to marvel a beaten champion. George now had to confront the crushing embarrassment of not only being defeated, but having been bamboozled in front of the whole world. His fall from grace was precipitous, complete. He went from being a figure of awe and terror, from people being in awe of his presence, to eliciting only pity from those who saw him. A fallen idol, stripped bare of his power, his bravado, his carefully constructed persona. In the wake of this devastating loss, a mental breakdown began to take place. It's a hard thing to live with, losing something like the championship of the world, Foreman confessed, his voice heavy with the lingering pain of defeat. I'd have fight that fight most nights, and I'd be winning. Then I get knocked down, and by the time I jump up, I wake up out of the dream again. The nightmare of Zaire haunted him, replaying endlessly in his mind. I could not win that fight, not even in my dreams. This time, this man has gotten me to the point where I just taste his presence in box, and I really want to beat him more than anything in the world. I want to beat him. I want them to be behind me and be a fan and hope that the public was a man that I fight with man again. Longing for redemption, yearning to regain the public's respect, George, in a desperate attempt to prove himself, agreed to a bizarre spectacle, an event that would have him fight 5 men in one night. This outlandish promotion, a desperate grab for attention, did little to heal his wounded spirit. He is not popularly received, as you can hear, the commentator noted, the jeers of the crowd a constant reminder of his fallen status. Ali has created, sitting here to my right, a carnival atmosphere in the arena. Even those closest to Foreman recognized the depth of his despair. Even those closest to George Foreman have been concerned about the fact he's not been the same man ever since Ali Beta. The spectacle descended into farce, a chaotic display of Foreman's unraveling mental state. Referee Harry Davis to stop the fight, the announcer declared, confusion and disbelief in his voice. What is happening there? Foreman is not himself. He's going after the kid again, needlessly, for no reason. Chaos erupted in the ring, trainers clashing, the event spiraling out of control. Now there's going to be a fight between the trainers, the commentator exclaimed. Now there's nothing but mayhem in the ring. The thing totally out of control. Amidst the pandemonium, George Foreman stood alone in the center of the ring, walking around the center of the ring, looking at the fans who are booing them. The cheers had turned to jeers, the adulation replaced by ridicule. No way that Powerpuff lowdown good-for-nothing loudmouth Moore Hammond, whatever he called his name, can beat no George Foreman. How can you be a champion and live against the road? The dispirited Foreman, his spirit broken, made a second ill-fated run at the title, but the aura of invincibility was gone, shattered in the jungles of Zaire. He no longer inspired the same fear in his opponents, his vulnerabilities now painfully plain to see. His aspirations, once boundless, came abruptly to an end on a sweltering night in Puerto Rico. A little-known underdog, a fighter nobody expected to challenge Foreman, handed him the second loss of his career, a defeat far more crushing than the first. Exhausted, defeated, dehydrated, George retreated to his dressing room, seeking solace, seeking escape. But instead, he found himself facing the ultimate reckoning. Exhausted and dehydrated, George made his way to his dressing room, where he would soon lose consciousness and find himself in a state of complete misery. In the darkness of that dressing room, in the depths of his physical and spiritual collapse, George Foreman experienced a profound transformation. All of my life went out of me, he recounts, his voice hushed with reverence. My leg gave out on me, and I was in this deep, dark place like a dump yard. I've every sad thought I'd ever had in my life. It was a horrible smell to go along with it that I've never forgotten to this day, and I know this place was hell. In that moment of utter despair, amidst the stench of defeat and the darkness of his soul, George Foreman uttered a desperate plea, a cry for salvation. But I said, I don't care if this is death, I still believe in God. And in that instant, everything changed. When I said that, I was rescued out of this place, he recounts, his voice filled with awe. I was in a dress room. They looked at me and I started screaming and haven't stopped since. Jesus Christ has come alive in me. Through the crucible of heat prostration, through the depths of physical and spiritual collapse, George heard the message that God felt he needed to hear, and it brought about a seismic shift, a profound change in his life that needed to happen. The brash, menacing George Foreman was gone, replaced by a man reborn, a man transformed by faith. Fans, witnessing this dramatic metamorphosis, were understandably in disbelief when the 28-year-old announced his retirement from boxing. This supposed awakening, many skeptics believed, would be short-lived, a fleeting moment of religious fervor. But George Foreman's conviction to his faith would prove to be undeniable. He dedicated the following 10 years of his life to the church as an evangelist, embracing a life of service and humility. He gave away all his earthly possessions, divesting himself of the trappings of fame and fortune, embracing a life of simple devotion. The gentle giant, long buried beneath layers of aggression and ego, had finally been set free from the prison that was his early public persona. This transformation was profound, genuine, undeniable. Even former rivals, once consumed by animosity, witnessed the change with awe and respect. "This is the proof that I was in the fight with him," Joe Frazier admitted, his voice filled with a newfound warmth. "In the world, I actually hated him. And today I talked with him all the time. I love him now." The animosity, the bitterness, had dissolved, replaced by a genuine affection for the man George Foreman had become. The transformation extended beyond his personal life, permeating his very understanding of his past profession. "I can't understand how another man would ball up his fist and put on gloves and try to knock another man in the country," Foreman confessed, his voice tinged with remorse. "I just can't see it. I don't understand how I did it. I couldn't do that again." The violent spectacle he had once embraced, the brutal persona he had so carefully cultivated, now seemed alien, incomprehensible, a relic of a past life he had left behind. By 1987, a decade after his spiritual awakening, Foreman's focus shifted to tangible acts of service. He devoted himself to a youth and community center that he had founded, pouring what was left from his career earnings into this youth center until his savings were all but dried up. Driven by a need to sustain his charitable work, compelled by a sense of purpose beyond personal glory, in need of funds, George Foreman made a decision that would once again defy expectations, shatter conventions, and rewrite the ending to his already extraordinary story. He returned to the profession he knew best, but this time, everything was different. This time, he'd be entering the ring for the right reasons, his motivations no longer rooted in ego or intimidation, but in genuine altruism. And he'd be doing it as his true self, the menacing persona of old, replaced by the warm, approachable figure of the smiling preacher. "I made an announcement to my friends. I was coming back," Foreman recalls, the memory tinged with amusement. "The newspaper got a hold to it, and they started talking about me as bad as they could. The media, predictably, was skeptical, even derisive. George Foreman's chance of winning aren't slim, and none, they're fat and none," quipped one commentator, echoing the widespread disbelief. "One of the fighters takes that description heavyweight very serious now. He's conning himself. He cannot separate the fantasy and the reality." The critics were relentless, the doubters legion. "Every reporter would take a shot at me," Foreman remembers, unfazed. "He'll never do it. And they just take up the people criticize me in the same time they were making me all famous again." The image of the aging Foreman, overweight and seemingly past his prime, was ripe for ridicule. "Would you welcome George Foreman like? I don't like losing that weight anymore," Foreman joked, embracing the self-deprecating humor that would become his trademark. "I like being the biggest guy in the ring. It's like telling a lion to lose weight to fight a house cat, you know? Yeah." His weight became a constant source of amusement, a seemingly insurmountable obstacle to his comeback aspirations. 280 pounds when you went into training? That's a lot," an interviewer observed, incredulous. Foreman, with a twinkle in his eye, quipped back. "It was only 279. His self-awareness, his ability to laugh at himself, disarmed his critics, even charmed them. "But you look good. You look great," the interviewer conceded, genuinely impressed despite himself. Foreman, ever the showman, responded with playful mock vanity, "Are you only saying that because it's true?" Then, with a wink and a grin, he delivered a line that would become iconic, a testament to his newfound persona, his embrace of his own image, flaws and all. "Miss you with my rifle belly, ___ you," or no longer the glowering hedonist. George Foreman had become the smiling preacher man, a figure that viewers, against all odds, couldn't help but love. This new, affable personality was a reincarnation of Muhammad Ali's charisma, the very man who had once been his nemesis, now serving as an unlikely inspiration. And the crowds, sensing the genuineness of his transformation, greeted the announcement of his name with outpours of affection, cheers replacing the boos of years past. For a decade, the heavyweight division's most frightening force lay dormant, but his power, miraculously, remained, now coupled with wisdom, a potent combination, an unstoppable marriage that the new generation of boxers weren't ready for. Oh, what a right hand. Oh, the commentator's voice crackled with excitement. The impossible suddenly, thrillingly possible. George Foreman, after all these years, still acts as though he's the boss in the ring, a ringside observer noted. He just sort of presents himself there and said, "This is my place." His fights became must-see spectacles, a captivating blend of nostalgia and genuine competition. "Can be explosive, look at him with arms like tree trunks," the commentator exclaimed, marveling at Foreman's still formidable physique. And then, the inevitable, the moment everyone had been waiting for, the thunderous right hand. "And there he goes. Oh, it has said, and this fight's over. George Foreman." Even in his 40s, Foreman's power remained devastating, his knockouts as sudden and brutal as ever. "I'm getting talented people running from me in the ring," Foreman joked, his trademark humor now laced with a touch of self-awareness, even irony. "Mike Tyson, Holyfield, you a bunch of bums." But amidst the playful banter, a steely glint of determination remained. "Instead of him be a man and fight a real fighter," he challenged the reigning champions, his message clear. He was back, and he was serious. That was pretty good one. Foreman was once again a bona fide contender, and his dream was now America's dream. The promotional machine roared to life, fueled by the improbable comeback story. The promotional force that was Big George was a goldmine for the sport, his immense marketability now eclipsing even his boxing prowess. And it would be hard put to find another fighter whose celebrity had swelled to such heights, a commentator observed, marveling at Foreman's unprecedented public appeal. George Foreman has become the undisputed champion of the big sell in boxing. No one is bigger, more admired, or more in demand. His commercials, his endorsements, his very persona became cultural touchstones. "You taught your kids how to eat like this?" an interviewer asked, capturing the essence of Foreman's new wholesome image. "George is natural," a close associate explained. "George knows people, George loves kids, and his heart pours out to them." This genuine warmth, this authentic connection with the public, was the key to Foreman's improbable resurgence. No one had rung the publicity drum as relentlessly as George had, his self-promotion becoming an art form, a masterclass in crafting a public persona that resonated deeply with audiences worldwide. So, despite his critics' constant skepticism, Foreman's comeback defied expectations. Every other fighter was begging for the payday that a Foreman matchup would bring them. One fighter, however, remained skeptical, convinced the old man was ripe for the picking. Evander Holyfield, the undisputed world champion, accepted the challenge, believing he would finally put an end to the Foreman fairy tale. One fighter who thought the old man would be easy picking was the undisputed world champion, Evander Holyfield. The fight was a grueling 12-round war of attrition, a clash of generations, a battle between youthful speed and veteran power. "Right hand on surface of Holyfield's head, and he's momentarily stunned," the commentator exclaimed, the tension palpable. "It's on the left of the joint, turns things around again, another left hook and a right. Will George go down?" Holyfield, the younger, faster fighter, was relentless, pushing the aging Foreman to his limits. "When Evander stopped fussing, George gets a chance, and he's making the most of it right now," the commentator noted, recognizing Foreman's unwavering determination. Even in the face of Holyfield's relentless assault, Foreman refused to yield, absorbing punishment, weathering the storm, waiting for his opportunity to strike. "Joy's caught me one time in that fight," Foreman later admitted. "And I thought he knocked all my teeth up, and I go back to the corner," I said. Did he knock all my teeth out? Despite the brutal beating he endured, Refusing to back away from the division's toe-to-toe king, Foreman showed little effect from the beating he was taking and made sure to give the champion a taste of his face-numbing power. Ultimately, the decision didn't go his way, Holyfield retaining his title in a unanimous decision. But any lingering thought of his return being a farce had come to an end. George Foreman had proven his resilience, his determination, his enduring power. "I still would like to be heavyweight champ of the world," he declared, his dream undiminished. "I didn't come back for a decent payday. I came back for the heavyweight title. Knocked me on the floor, beat me up, then I'll quit. But if you can't do that, I'll be here." George's immense marketability was attracting him million-dollar sponsors and endorsements. His public appearances, his commercials, his television show became a lucrative empire, overshadowing even his boxing career. Become so preoccupied with public appearances, commercials, and even his own television show that his boxing career had become secondary. His boxing ability, once his defining characteristic, now seemed to be round, and pressure for him to retire began piling up. Taking a lot of punishment this round. "I haven't seen George take this much punishment than any fight in a long, long time," the commentator observed, concern creeping into his voice. "He's taking a lot more punishment here than he has in any fight in the comeback, and the time may be running out on the second career of Big George Foreman." The question, unspoken yet hanging heavy in the air, was it time for George to finally hang up his gloves? "George, you've thrilled us. You've been great. You've inspired us. You've entertained us," an interviewer pleaded, his voice filled with genuine concern. "But now, please, isn't it time to go back to the old fishing hole before you seriously get hurt?" Foreman, ever defiant, ever resolute, bristled at the suggestion. "You know, I really resent the fact that people that keep asking me, when are you going to quit? How many fights are you gonna have?" he retorted, his voice laced with irritation. "I leave Boston when I want to. The main thing in the world is not to let anyone dictate my life." His comeback, his life, was his own to define, his own to control. "I've gotten into the ring with guys and I've seen them turn their back and run," Foreman declared, a hint of his old menace returning. "I mean literally turn their backs on me and run. I'm not gonna call that a victory over me. You knock me down, you rip me awkward. If someone's whipped me, someone knocked me down, I'm never gonna fight again." He was daring anyone, anything to truly defeat him, to extinguish the fire that still burned within. Then came Michael Moorer, a new champion, a young lion eager to make his mark, bold enough to step into the ring with the legend. With the fall of Evander Holyfield, a new champion had emerged, a fighter who would be bold enough to try to knock the old man out. At 45 years of age, George Foreman was not just battling a younger opponent. He was battling Father Time itself. Now, 45 years of age, George was battling Father Time itself, the commentator intoned. The odds stacked heavily against the aging warrior. The youngster hunted for the finish and unloaded volley after volley. Moorer, the younger, faster, stronger fighter, pressed his advantage, unleashing a barrage of punches. But Foreman, drawing upon decades of experience, of grit, of sheer will, knew he no longer had the speed necessary to launch an effective retaliation. Instead, he employed a cunning strategy, a calculated deception. To lull his opponent to sleep, George refrained from letting his right hand go with full force, patiently waiting, biding his time, in hopes that the champion would feel comfortable enough to fight in the pocket, to the point where he no longer felt the need to hit and move. "I have a sense here that Moore feels as though he has felt Foreman's power, and it's not going to hurt him," the commentator observed, unknowingly foreshadowing the impending shock. "I thought that he would fight cautiously and work for a decision, but he now looks to me as though he thinks he's going to be able to knock Foreman out, and he thinks he'll do it by standing in front of him and trading shots." The trap was set, perfectly, deceptively. Could be a big mistake. For 10 long rounds, Michael Moore had been gaining the false sense of security that he could absorb the slow and powerless right crosses that Foreman had been releasing. Moorer, lulled into a false sense of confidence, stepped into the pocket, trading shots with the aging legend, unaware of the dormant volcano about to erupt. It was now George who played the role of the deceiver, the master manipulator, luring his prey into a fatal error. The trap was set, and Moore fell into it. Then, in the 10th round, it happened. A single, devastating punch, a right hand delivered with the force of a thunderbolt, changed everything. On a right hand, an unbelievably close in right hand shot. The impossible became reality. It happened. It happened. I can't believe it. Cosell's words, once again, echoed through the arena, a hauntingly familiar refrain, but this time heralding a victory of unimaginable proportions. As the referee waved his arms, signaling the end of the fight, George Foreman knelt in prayer in the neutral corner. Against all odds, against the relentless march of time itself, Foreman had regained the title which he had lost 20 years earlier, an unprecedented feat not only in boxing, but in sporting history. It was the perfect ending to the fairy tale story that was George Foreman's career, a victory that transcended sport, becoming a symbol of resilience, redemption, and the enduring power of the human spirit. George Foreman earned over $300 million, a staggering sum, enough to finance his community center 1,000 times over. And to this day, the building stands, a beacon of hope, offering refuge to all the youth who look to better themselves. But Foreman's true success is not measured by his riches, but by the growth of his character. He had spent a lifetime fiercely fighting off anyone who tried to dictate how he should live his life. And in doing so, George accomplished every goal he had ever set out to achieve. But more importantly, he found himself along the way. I believe George is the most underappreciated heavyweight of all time, a boxing expert concludes, reflecting on Foreman's extraordinary journey. For one reason, he won the legitimate heavyweight championship of the world 20 years apart, as two different fighters and two entirely different human beings. First half of his career, tried desperately to be Sonny Listed. In the second half, he tried to be Muhammad Ali, and somehow he pulled them both off. Another observer, deeply moved by Foreman's transformation, adds, "I thought he needed love, and I thought he had to find himself, and he did that. He exhibited such human qualities when the second George Foreman emerged that the first George Foreman was really forgotten." I like the idea of being remembered as a boxer, Foreman reflects, his voice now gentle, reflective. But I think 20 years from today, when people look back, I want them to remember that George Foreman was not afraid to pursue life and ready to conquer the world. And indeed, that is the enduring legacy of George Foreman, a man who came, who saw, and who, against all odds, conquered not just the boxing world, but himself.